Python can send data over the internet to another machine. I don't want to show you exactly how to do that, but I want to show you the functions that are necessary to accomplish that. And your task is to actually write two files where one communicates to the other over the internet. So let's go into a new directory. All right, so I'm just going to write notes about how this works. So first of all, socket is how Python opens a connection on a port to another machine. Or opens a connection, and then the way that actually works is one program opens a port and opens a random port actually, and connects to another program specific port. So, e.g., machine 10.10.5.12 port whatever connects to machine 10.10.7.52 port 1033 or 10,033. Right, so to make a connection, in other words, for the two programs to talk to each other, each program needs to use a port and have an IP address. So both sides need a port and an IP address, and the side that wants to, so if A wants to connect to B, then A is just going to choose a random port because it doesn't make any difference. It just needs to be one that's not used yet. And A will use that random port to connect to B on a specific port. So the machine you're connecting to, you got to know which port it's expecting you on. Sorry about the rooster. So let me fix this. Probably should be other words. In Python, there's a few functions necessary. First, required Python code. Actually, before that, sorry, let's say you'll need at least two files. One is the server that waits, or we say listens, for a connection on a specific port. And then two, the client that initiates the connection to the server. So the server listens, the client connects. In summary, server listens, client connects. And the code will kind of reflect that. So required Python code, in all cases, well, I'm going to mix the code necessary for server and client all in the same set of notes here, and it's your task to kind of understand which one's necessary in which file. So both are going to need import socket. Both are going to need import socket funcs. So socket provides the basic underlying code for the Python program to actually make sockets on Linux. Socket funcs is a file that I wrote to simplify a lot of the operations, because technically on using a socket directly, you have to send one byte at a time, which is like one letter at a time, and you have to keep track of how many you sent, and it's kind of a nuisance. So socket funcs contains code that just kind of hides a lot of that stuff. All right. Next, this line will be initiate a socket, required for both. I won't always say if it's required for both. It's kind of your task, but in this case, it's I don't want you to get confused. So socket is how you create a socket. Next, we'll call this indicate which IP address and port to listen on. This would be s.bind, 2 parentheses, the IP and the port. And we might say often IP is, i.e. listen from all network connections. So a machine might actually have multiple connections to networks through multiple different network cards. And 0.0.0.0 just means I'm going to listen on all of them. I don't care where the connection is coming from, I'll be able to receive it. And of course you have to choose a port. Then wait for a connection. That's s.listen. Then make a connection to a specific IP and port. That's s.connect, double parentheses, IP and port. So connect is kind of the opposite of listen. Accept a connection after listening and get connection info. It returns a pair of things. This is s.accept. So this would happen after a listen. When the listen succeeds and the code proceeds, so it stops waiting, then you'll want to accept that connection. And you'll, at that point, identify who it's coming from because it'll be the address. And then connection, C-O-N-N, is the variable you want to use for communication. So, for example, receive a message on a connection. Of course, want to save the message, otherwise there's not much point in receiving it. So we say message equal, and then sockets functs receive message on that connection. And then send a message through socket, through a connected socket. That would be the alternative, socket functs dot send message s message. That one uses s, not con, because when you're sending, you don't have to have accepted a connection. You're just going to use the same socket that you used to make the connection. And then close the socket. End of program. Probably at the end of the program. All right, so those are your functions. You've got here mixed up between client and server, so it's your task to figure that out. Import socket and socket functs in both cases. S equals socket socket in both cases. Now at that point you have kind of two choices. You can bind and listen. In other words, you're saying, okay, I'm going to receive something. Or you can attempt to make a connection to something that is already listening. Now if you try to connect to something that's not yet listening, it won't work. If you've received a connection and you're currently listening, you should accept that connection. And then at that point, both sides can send and receive to each other, and it just depends which variable they're using. If it's received a connection with the accept command, it should use the con variable. If it's on the other side and just it initiated the connection, it should use the s variable. Otherwise, once you're done sending and receiving, you should close the socket. Now, if you don't close the socket or you quit your program early, you may find that when you run it again, the socket is still being used. You might have to wait like 1 or 2 minutes or so for Linux to kind of clean it all up. So if you find that it says socket is busy, I think it says, then just wait a little bit and try the program again. Also, in summary, I'll put up here you also need to start PuTTY or terminal twice to run each program separately. Start the server first. So you're going to need 2 windows because you're going to need both programs running. The server needs to be waiting before you start the client. And the goal would be the server just waits for a message and then the client sends it. And if that's successful, the server should be able to print the message it received. And maybe it will send one back too if you want to try that.